Hi, I'm Ines von Teichswimmer, and today I will tell you about the filling water for your schwimmteich.
Your channel for swimteichs. Nature in your garden and water that's alive. Enjoy watching.
If you build a schwimmteich, of course you have to think about what water you use for filling it up. The advantage you have is that you have to fill it only once in a lifetime, and then it hopefully gets refilled by rain. Of course it depends on the region of the world you live in, what kind of water you have available. But in general you can say you either have water from a well that comes right out of the ground. That's of course a very good water to fill up your schwimmteich. Second, you might have a river or a creek nearby. You can also use it, of course. The advantage you have with a river or a creek is that you could have some fish eggs or frog eggs or whatever. You could have that in the water, and you might fill those things in with the water into your schwimmteich, and you don't want that. You don't want fish, you don't want frogs in your schwimmteich. And then most of the people either have a well in the garden where they have the groundwater available to them, or you have tap water. Most people have either one of those possibilities. Let's start with the groundwater. The groundwater is better to use in fall. Why? In spring, after the winter, the groundwater is still full of nutrients because no plants have taken out these nutrients from the groundwater during the winter. That's why in spring the groundwater is still full of nutrients. So that's why it's not so good to use it for filling your schwimmteich. If you build your teich in fall, that's much better because the groundwater is is very poor of nutrients, because during the summer the plants, the trees, the surrounding have taken out all the nutrients from the groundwater, or most of the nutrients out of the groundwater. So if you use this kind of water better in fall than in spring. If you have only tap water available, that's also fine. I will tell you afterwards why it doesn't really matter what kind of water you have. Tap water can be very different in different regions. First thing you have to know is, for the quality of the water, for drinking water, it's not important how much nutrients or nitrates the water contains, because it does not harm the quality for drinking. But the nutrients are in this water. Even if it's very good for drinking, it can be full of phosphates, that's the nutrients. And if you fill your schwimmteich up with this water, it's also good, but you have to be aware of the fact that if you have a lot of nutrients coming into your schwimmteich with the filling water, then of course you will have a haze for some time. I will explain why. But in general, we have to say, you have the water available that's available, right? So don't worry too much. Why? I will explain to you. What happens to the water when it gets into your hole that should be a schwimmteich? The water always contains microorganisms, but in the tap water, you have to imagine that the microorganisms that are in the water there, they are sleeping. And as soon as you fill your schwimmteich, the water gets the sunlight, and because of the light, those microorganisms, they awake, they start to live. And that's what happens when you fill up your schwimmteich with any kind of water. The microorganisms that are in this water, no matter what kind, they awake and they start to live. So now, depending on the water you fill in, you might have a very nutrient poor water, then you won't have much haze. If you have water with a lot of nutrients in it, the microorganisms, they all start to live and to work. Microorganisms start to feed on the nutrients and start to bloom. The water gets turbid. So the algae feed until all the nutrients are gone. What happens then? More or less overnight, there's no more nutrients to feed on, so all the green carpet of algae starves, dies, and starts to sink down as sediments. And that's why sometimes overnight the water clears up, the turbidity goes away like it has never been there. What's left is this kind of dust, that's sediments, and the nutrients that the algae fed on is binded in these sediments. The sediments sink to the floor, to the bottom, and as long as they sit there, water stays clear. But if you start to swim and these sediments start to float because of your swimming, because they get raised by swimming or diving, the nutrients get into the circulation of nutrition again, and they are again food for the algae. That's why a schwimmteich has this deep zone, because if you broom all the sediments down to the deep zone and they stay there, and once or twice a year you pump those sediments out, nutrients won't get into circulation again. This is what happens when you fill a schwimmteich, and this is what leads to turbidity. It's the nutrients in the water, in the filling water. What can you do against it? Nothing. You can just wait and see. The only thing, you don't have to test your water, because normally you have only one choice. You can use tap water, you can use, if you have other possibilities, then it might make sense if you have two alternatives to use. If you have a well in the garden and you have tap water, then we would recommend that you make a test of the water, and then you see which water has less phosphates and nitrates, because that's the nutrients. And then I would use the water with less phosphate in it, clearly. What about chlorinated tap water? In many regions of the world, the tap water is chlorinated. So you might think, we cannot use this. No, you can use it. If you fill your schwimmteich with chlorinated tap water, what will happen is the chlorine will gas out within a few days. That's how it is with chlorine. It gases out. What remains is a water that's more or less dead. So then there will be some microorganisms still in the water, but we never know what kind survived the chlorine. So that's why it's so important, and more important with chlorinated tap water, that you inoculate the schwimmteich. Inoculation is when you take water from a functional water body, like a swimteich, another swimteich, or another swimming pond, for example, you take 20 liters of this water, you take it to your filled up swimteich, and you pour it in. Like this, you take the microorganisms of a functional water, you take that and you put that balanced water into your swimteich, and those balanced relation of microorganisms will spread here in your water, and this helps your water to get into balance. What if you don't have anything to inoculate, no water available? You can do two things. You can either put in effective microorganisms, that's a liquid that contains the right microorganisms for swimteichs, and you pour that in. And the other possibility you have is to do nothing and wait. Most probably your swimteich will get turbid, and it will take longer than with inoculation, but most probably the water will get into balance in the end. Yeah, that's about it about this topic, the filling of your swimteich. One thing is important, I nearly forgot. When you fill the swimteich up, you do that in two periods. The first filling is the filling of the deep zone only. You do that once the liner is completed. Once the welding of the liner is completed, you have more or less the whole pool in front of you, and then you fill up the deep zone so that when you continue working, the liner will not go down once the water is filled in. So you do that before. Once the water in the deep zone is full, you create the regeneration zone, the aquaculture, and then once you have finished that and the edges, you fill it up once until the top edge. Try to do that in two rows, and not some liters now, some liters tomorrow. Try to fill it on in one stream. Why? Because you have to imagine, as I said, water gets into your swimteich, water starts to get alive, water has to get into balance and needs to pay attention to this. And once you start to fill in more after a week, for example, okay, then for the water it's again something new is coming. We have to cope with that new water, with those new intruders of nutrients and microorganisms. So the water has to start the process of getting into balance all over again. And that's why you should fill it once to the top. Yeah, that was about it. I hope there was something interesting for you in this video. If so, please give us a thumb up. And if you like to know more, be welcome to subscribe up to our channel. Thank you. Bye bye.